Content warning. This episode contains many sensitive subjects throughout, such as substance abuse, mental illness, and suicide. If that will be triggering for you, then please feel free to give this episode a miss. Thank you.
Hello, amateurs, and welcome to another episode of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some fantastic rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host, Tim, and I've got another incredible guest for you today. This man was the star of his US college rugby team. He made a ton of money in tech, and now he's an author. Please welcome Mr. Tyler Kania. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Good, man. Just tell the people where you are at the moment.
I'm in Eastern Connecticut, in the Northeast in the U.S. Lots of snow right now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, first question. Did you ever think you'd become an author?
Part of me always wanted to, but no, I didn't. Certainly not at the age of 32. But the way things played out, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, okay, cool. And we're going to get into all the detail, obviously, but just tell the folks the title of your book and why that's the title.
Yeah, it's called The Maniac with No Knees. Maniac because I suffer from bipolar 1 disorder, which consistently gives me manic episodes. And it's no knees because you'll be hard pressed to find anybody, rugby player or else, that has ruptured both of their patellar tendons. It's an injury that happens once for every 147,000 human years. So to have it happen twice, it's kind of like discovering life on other planets.
It is absolutely wild that that's happened. How are you at the moment? How have you? Because I know you can have medication for bipolar. How's your sort of mood?
Yeah, I mean, right now things are going good. I when I was institutionalized, which it's part of my book, I was formally diagnosed with bipolar. I had been undiagnosed for many years, and they gave me lithium, which is a mood stabilizer. It's a very effective drug. And, I tell people that if you suffer from a mental illness, you need 3 things in your life. You need a community to belong to. You need a goal to wake up to every morning. And you need medication. That's just the hard truth. But, I have a community, both on the rugby field and, the people that have been following my writing closely. I have goals, for my writing for the rest of my rugby career and so forth. And I have medication. So things are going pretty good. But, a lot of people look at me because I write this story about how I overcame all of these terrible things with bipolar and my knees. And a lot of other bipolars might look at me as kind of the other side, getting to the other side of bipolar, a success story, if you will. But this is a lifelong illness, and I suffer every single day. I struggle with things like substance abuse, and I struggle with depression. And, I tell people I'm not suicidal, but that doesn't mean I don't have suicidal thoughts every day. I think there's a fundamental difference. When you're actually suicidal, it's all you think about, and you plan it, and stuff like that. Whereas, now it's just kind of like, oh, something bad happens, I have a fleeting thought, and that's pretty much it. So I'm always going to be in recovery, and I'm always going to be working at getting better. But it is a lifelong illness, and I'm managing it well right now.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, let's take it back, Tyler, to when you first got involved in rugby. Tell me that story. What were your first sort of steps into the game?
Yeah. Well, my dad played, and, he was a fullback and occasionally a fly half. And, in America, rugby isn't huge, but we always had a ball around the house. Football was my main concentration. There was no organized youth rugby in Eastern Connecticut. On the other side of Connecticut, closer to New York, rugby thrives at the youth level. You'll have the number 1 team in the country there and all sorts of great teams, but it's really doesn't have a presence around here. And so I was big on football. My athleticism wasn't completely aligned to the sport, but I played for a long time and I got pretty good. And I was the captain of my inner city high school rugby team. It was mostly Hispanics and we called ourselves La Familia. And it was a great group to belong to. And I'll share you a hack for anybody who might have played football and is transitioning to rugby. The reason why I was naturally a really, really good passer at rugby was because I was a long snapper in football. And people don't think about that, but that motion is very similar. And you have to have pinpoint accuracy because if you screw up, nobody knows the long snapper's name until he screws up, So when I found it in college, I instantly was like, wow, this is my sport. How have I been missing this for so long? And, in my first ever drill, I pulled off this like slick behind the back pass and the guy scored and everybody was like, don't do that again. And I was like, I think I found my sport.
You know what, Tyler? There's an amazing coincidence here. I've only ever had one other American on the podcast, and he was also a long snapper.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. So tell me about the college time there with the players and maybe the culture as well. What was college football like in the US? Sorry, college.
Yeah, college rugby. When I started in 2011, there wasn't NCAA rugby. There wasn't an MLR. It was a lot of disjointed bodies of rugby. And, in my book, what I say is the CCSU hooligan rookie class of 2011 came into a rugby club where it was common to smoke a cigarette on the field, put it down to make a tackle, and then pick it back up and keep smoking. So it was a lot of, our team name was appropriate, the Hooligans. But my rookie class was quite good. We had a lot of great players. We had some players who had excelled at the high school level and some players who should have been playing Division I football. And we came together and, to 4 conference championships and we won 3 of them. And, I was the fly half. I was pulling the strings. I was the maestro. And it was a great feeling. We started to make rugby a thing on campus where everybody would come to our games and, watch our highlight tapes and, people knew who all the players were. And it was a great community that we built. And, I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. Tell me a bit more about the name, because was that an official name or was that just a nickname? Because I can't imagine a college ratifying the Hooligans.
Yeah, well, since we were not an NCAA team, we were not allowed to use our college logo or our college team name, which was the Blue Devils. And so each club faction creates their own team name. And, for us, it was, a hooligan, to me is kind of somebody who doesn't really belong, kind of an outcast or a misfit. We were guys who came from all sorts of places, and none of us had really thought a ton about rugby up until college, outside of a couple people. And, we came together. We were just a bunch of hooligans, and somehow, we created a dynasty. And, it was, you had to be there, but it was a magical time. It really was, because, none of us belonged to anything other than rugby, and we were so passionate about it. And we had a lot of, hijinks about the club, like rookies had to come home with a pet chicken to take care of for a week or two, just crazy stuff like that. That was kind of half fraternity, half sports team.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, like some of the stories around like the parties and things like that you had.
Yeah. Well, we had an anger room, which was basically a room in the basement where you just smash glass bottles when you were angry. We had guys who were in a band who would go on top of the roof of the first floor and play for, different parties and stuff like that. And, don't tell the university this, but we did have a level of hazing. When I was a rookie and I was trying to graduate to become a rookie, they locked us in a basement overnight, and we had to complete all these tasks. Like, I had never had ketchup in my life, so they made me take a shot of straight ketchup. And then they kidnapped us and they put pillowcases over our head, and they dropped us off in a graveyard, and we had to find our way back to campus. So just a bunch of crazy stuff like that. But, more than anything, we were about a winning culture. And I think over my career as a fly half, I think I was 35-3. So we really didn't lose a whole lot.
Yeah, that's an incredible record. Now tell me, what was it about playing fly half that really attracted you to the position?
Yeah, I'm a good communicator. I like to be in control. And, I was confident in my skill set. And the team responded to me. I was always in their ear. I was creative, and I would try different things. I was good at kicking out of hand, and I was good at the long pass, the long skip pass, and I was good at, the deceptive little pop, and offloading at contact. And, for me, like, I was never tall enough to play quarterback in football. I actually had a pretty big growth spurt when I got to college. When I was in high school, I was like the smallest guy on the team, and then I grew up to be 6 foot, 200 pounds, which is kind of an ideal size for a fly half. And so once I finally had that sort of leadership role, it gave me so much confidence. It gave me so much pride. And it gave me so much hope for the future, because I really thought that I could play at a level with anybody that I had seen, in the States at least.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, you mentioned about how playing American football had enabled you to sort of pass really well, but then you said you kick really well as well. How did you develop your kicking, or was it something that you already had?
That was kind of natural. My dad was a place kicker in football, and he did all the kicking for his rugby team. And honestly, it just comes with work. Anything that you want to develop for a skill, you got to put in the time. And I'd go to the field, I'd practice my kicking to touch, I'd practice my drop kicks, practice off a tee, and eventually I got pretty good at it. And I think one of the things that made me good was I was able to kick it out of hand quickly, right? I was able to respond to a defense that was coming up into my face and still get off a kick. And I think that probably was more aligned with just a natural ability to do it.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk more about that playing record then at college, because 35-3 is remarkable. How did you get into a team? How did you develop a team to get that kind of record?
It happened over time. We had like the core group of guys who were really strong. We had a bunch of forwards who, were big and were tough to bring down and could also run in the open field. We had a fullback who was incredibly fast. And, honestly, we were a state college where the school didn't offer enough courses for a lot of the majors. And so people were constantly playing a 5th or a 6th year on the team. And that kind of helped. But as we got better, people started to notice and people wanted to transfer in. And we got a former high school All-American who had been at Kutztown, which is a rugby powerhouse in the States. And he was someone who could play all 15 positions. It was incredible. Like, this guy, he could play prop, he could play hooker, he could play fly half, scrum half, and we used him at all those positions, and he did a great job. And then we had another guy who transferred in from another state college who was the biggest guy in the conference. He was about 6'6", 350 pounds, and he knew rugby. And so we got all these pieces together, and the last piece was my college roommate. And listen to this. My dad's college roommate, who was also the scrum half of that team, was the father of my college roommate, who over time I had to convince him, because he was a small guy. He became our scrum half, and he became the best scrum half in the conference. And having that relationship with my roommate, the scrum half to fly half connection, we had a 2-bedroom apartment where the door frames were parallel to one another. So we would get in each other's room and we would just pass and try and thread it through the door frame. And, we did it so much that, like, nobody had that 9-10 connection that we had. So that was really, really important to me to get him on the field because, you know, when you're a fly half, you're only as good as the people around you. And I had great people around me, and it made my life a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like an incredible way to build a connection, both in skills, but also person to person as well, which I'm sure was really important.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Back to some of the more social things though around that college rugby. I mean, I think most people in University of Rugby in England, and I'm sure it's the same in college rugby in the US, you know, there's a reasonable amount of drinking that goes on in those kind of environments, but you do it on Thursdays as well before a Saturday game. Tell me about those Thursday nights.
Yeah, the Thursday drink ups, we'd go to the rugby house and we'd go in the basement or the garage. We'd get a keg, and it was just a time for, you know, rookies to become acclimated to the team environment off the field, get to know each other better. We did a lot of rugby songs. Some were unique to our club that had been passed down from generation to generation, and some had been, you know, more common rugby songs. And at the end, we'd gather together, and the captains would have a pump-up speech. You know, we'd bring ourselves together that way. And so it was a great environment. But, you know, if you read my book, my first game as captain of the team, you know, I was a little rambunctious at the drink up, and I blacked out. I broke down a sorority's door, and I was arrested for first-degree burglary, suspended for my first game as captain. And that was kind of the first time I showed symptoms of bipolar disorder. But at the time, it was so hard to know because it was like, you know, okay, is this just a crazy college kid who got really excited one night, or is this something deeper than that? Is there, you know, a neurological disjointment that's causing it? And so it wasn't for a few more years after that where things actually got bad. But that was definitely kind of the first sign.
Yeah, and I mean, it might be hard to think back about how you thought about it at the time, but have you got any recollections about how you thought about your own behavior that night?
Just shame. You know, I was lucky that I had a coach who believed in me enough to only suspend me for one game and to keep me on as the captain of the team. Some teams would have just let me go and say, you're not a part of our club anymore. You're not representing us the way we want. So I was fortunate to have that. But, you know, before that, like I had played for a premier rugby team that had, you know, Team USA guys and former Team Fiji guys and all these great players. And I had, you know, ambitions to play rugby at the highest level. Like I said, there was no MLR at that point, but, you know, there were avenues for me to try and succeed. But when that happened, you know, my parents kind of were like, look, you know, I know you want rugby to be what you think about after college, but you need to get a real job, and rugby can just be, you know, your hobby in the meantime. And so that definitely changed the trajectory of my career and my life. But I was able to, you know, play for a bit until I ruptured my patellar tendon, which opens a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, well, that was going to be the exact next thing that I was going to ask about. I mean, it is about as horrific an injury as you can ever suffer. So, I mean, can you try and sort of talk us through it, exactly how you felt at the time and then the sort of period afterwards as well?
Yeah, it was a difficult time for me on the field because, you know, I had represented the state of Connecticut at fly half at like a big rugby tournament, and you know, I thought that I was as good as anyone around, but I was playing for the Hartford Wanderers men's club, and our head coach was actually the fly half as well. He was a British guy, and he had gray hair, and he knew more about rugby than I'd ever forgotten. But you know, I was still trying to break my way into the starting lineup. They were throwing me at fullback, which I didn't love, and you know, we were tackling in practice, which I also didn't love. And I was cutting left, and my teammate pulled me down from behind, and my knee went into my quad. And that triggered my first ever manic episode. I quit rugby for 4.5 years. I quit my 6-figure job I was broken up with, and I moved to Idaho and just spent months adventuring across the West trying to reconcile my behavior. And that was really tough because, you know, I had no idea that I had this mental illness. I had no idea why my behavior had taken the way it had. And it took years to really figure it out.
Yeah, it must have been an incredibly difficult time. Now, it was during that sort of time that you and a pal decided to hike across the Grand Canyon. Now, I've hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back up, and it nearly killed me. But you did quite a lot more than that, didn't you?
Yeah, and mind you, since I had quit rugby, and went manic, like I wasn't in my right mind, so I didn't really rehab my injury. And so this was 7 or 8 months post ruptured patellar tendon, and the north rim of the Grand Canyon was closed, which means there was no access to it, which means that if you were going to hike to the north rim, you had to hike back to the south rim. So it was like 47 miles, and it was about 6,000 feet in elevation. And, when you're bipolar, sometimes you just don't think of the right priorities. You're just a little absent-minded. So I only brought enough food to last for the first day, and I only packed, enough clothes that I didn't realize like how cold it was going to get at the North Rim, or that it might rain. And, I was really suffering on the trek back home. But when I was at the North Rim, obviously we're the only ones camping there. And it's like 5 a.m. and I hear some coughing down by like the water faucet. And I go down there, and I kid you not, it was the most athletic looking man I've ever seen. He was Asian. He was about 6'5", and he wore like a little headlamp. And I talked to this guy, and he goes, "Yeah, every full moon I run rim to rim to rim, and I'm trying to do it in about 7 hours, 7.5 hours." And I was like, all right, well, if this guy can do that, like I can hike back, like I can make it. And I almost didn't make it, but I did, and I felt a lot of pride when I did finish, because, it was a big achievement. And, the Grand Canyon is not something to scoff at. It really is grand.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of that. And I mean, you couldn't have been, despite the knee, like you couldn't have been in the best physical shape of your life either, because you've, been off that knee for such a long time as well. So it's quite incredible,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was out of shape, but, I had put rugby aside, but after I hiked the Grand Canyon, I still had ambitions as an athlete, and I became a long distance runner, and I won my town's 5K, and, I actually ran the marathon 13 months post-operation. And so now that I'm rehabbing my second ruptured patellar tendon, it's really tough because I'm 8 years older, and I'm not healing as fast despite putting in more effort. But I did sign up for another marathon 13 months post-operation. So, I've got my goal, and, I plan to get back on the rugby field in July, this summer anyways, for sevens. And, I'm excited about it.
Tyler, that's incredible. Yeah, to run a marathon 13 months after that once, and then to sign up to do it again is wild. Now, there's a quote in the book from yourself which I want to explore, because I think it's really, I think a lot of people probably feel like this. And the quote is, "Rugby gave me 30 friends who made me feel confident about myself. I had to figure out a way to replicate that without having rugby in my life." So what did you find afterwards, and what helped you? You've already mentioned running, but was there anything else?
Yeah, my career. And honestly, it was a little toxic because I made a lot of money at an early age. I was making $250,000 when I was 26. And a big part of my identity became monetary wealth. There was that competitive streak. Being in cybersecurity sales is a very competitive atmosphere. And so to get those wins was huge. And some days it wasn't about the money. Some days it was about, proving myself and, winning that customer or doing good by that customer. But more and more it became, I'm better than you because I make a certain amount of money. And so when I did go manic again and I did quit that job, all of a sudden I don't have my community, I don't have my goals. And at that point I didn't have my medication. So I was pretty lost.
Yeah. And tell me, when you go through these episodes, either manic or depressive, like how long do they last for you?
Yeah, it completely depends. A manic episode can be 1 or 2 weeks, sometimes more. You know, if you get treatment, it can be less than that. Or it can kind of just manifest in a more mild form for a long period of time. Like when I was living in Boston, you know, I tell people I might have been manic that entire time. You know, I'd spill a bottle of Sprite on the floor and I'd go and buy a dozen copies of the Boston Globe to clean it up. You know, spend $35 to clean up a spill just because, you know, when you're manic, you're not thinking straight. Like I can't make coffee when I'm manic. I can't start the dishwasher. You know, I just can't do any task oriented things correctly. So it didn't matter that there's paper towels in the aisle next to the newspaper. You know, the newspaper was my fix. You know, I was so paranoid at all the people and all the things around me. I thought my Amazon Echo was listening to my business deals. When my car got stolen, I thought it was the Boston Mafia and that they were after me. So, you know, sometimes when you're in that mild state of mania, it can be tough to, like, you don't know you're manic when you're manic. You know, you need intervention to tell you you are. You just think you're being righteous. And, you know, you do need something that kind of backstops you from that at the end of the day. And a lot of times, you know, the inhibition of risk tolerance gets you, and you leave that manic episode for depression, for suicidal depression, because you screwed something up during that manic episode, right? Being manic can feel awesome until you screw something up.
Yeah, you're running all the way and then just jump off the edge of a cliff, basically, in terms of mental
Yeah,
state, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So you talked earlier about how much rugby helped you, and you managed to get back into the game even though you're injured through a coaching role. So tell me a little bit about that, how that came about, and how that went.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit of a long story. You know, I mentioned I was lost after I'd quit that job, and I spent a year just reading 300 pages of literature per day, just cooped up in my room, not talking to anybody, disassociating myself from the world. And after that year, I became very depressed. I couldn't find a job, and I attempted suicide. I put a noose around my neck, and you know, I tightened it, and I looked outside, and I realized that one of my best friends was getting married that next day, and that, you know, I might as well stick around. And then the very next week, I get invited to an old rugby friend's birthday party. And I hadn't seen any of these rugby friends in 4.5 years. I had thrown out everything to do with rugby. You know, it had been my dream, and my dream had been shattered, and I didn't want to be reminded of it. And I didn't want to see these people because they had looked at me as their captain with endless confidence, you know, and I hadn't worked in a year, and I was coming off of a suicide attempt. But I decided to go despite all that. And, you know, I show up to this party, and they've got new teammates there. They've got Six Nations rugby on TV. Give me a ball. And, you know, when I get the ball in my hands, you know, all that confidence, all that passion comes back to me, you know, and you get that feeling I can still do this, you know. And so they invited me to their exhibition match the next week. And our college coach was now their men's team coach for the Hartford Wanderers. And so that gave me a little comfort level. So I was like, all right, I'll come watch my four friends. You know, I showed up in jeans, you know, didn't think I would play or anything like that. But my coach's wife was there, and she had been a great source of confidence for me in college. And now she was, you know, cheering me on and telling me, you know, you should get back out there. And somehow, you know, like I said, it was an exhibition match, so it wasn't anything crazy, but an injury happened in the back line with like 10 minutes left. And somehow I ended back on the field. And the first time I touched it, you know, I assisted a game-winning try. So all of a sudden, rugby was back in my life. It came back in like right when I needed it most. And I worked hard to get back on the field. I, you know, started playing sevens that summer, and we were gearing up for the fall season, and I was playing some pickup basketball, and I hurt my MCL. Serendipitously, the day after that, the coaching position for the university 8 minutes away from my home opened up for Eastern Connecticut State women's rugby. And so I ended up getting that coaching job. And mind you, I really hadn't had human connection of substance in years. And now all of a sudden I was tasked with, creating a culture for 30 women. And, I found that I was a natural at it. I gave it my all. I, had chalk talk every day before practice where we would go over plays and formations and roles. And, we would watch tons of film. And, I had been doing well in cryptocurrency. So I bought the team $3,000 worth of balls and pads and equipment, books, tournament fees, you name it. And, it wasn't like we were an overnight success. We were the 3 seed going into playoffs, and, we studied film relentlessly. We had lost to Tufts University 31-0 in the regular season. They had beaten their opponents like 137-7 over the course of the season. And we went into their home field. They packed their stadium with fans because they wanted to show everyone the undefeated Tufts women's rugby team. And we went in there and we crushed them. We beat them 29-10. And, all of a sudden I felt like I had found my thing in life again. And, it brought me a lot of joy. The girls had so much fun that season that we extended the season by an extra month to train for a tournament in New York City. And I started to look at these girls kind of as friends as opposed to, student athletes that played on the team I coached. So during the off season, I started a cryptocurrency company. It was basically a decentralized rugby team that was owned and operated by the fans through a token to finance it all. It was basically called a decentralized autonomous organization. And what I wanted to do was change the way that teams govern themselves, change the way they pick a roster or a lineup. Or all the different small decisions, and basically if you had a certain level of rugby verified accreditations, that would grant you access to a certain amount of governing decisions that you could play a role in. And I got a lot of good feedback from it. I pitched it at the largest cryptocurrency conference in North America to venture capitalists and to technologists and even to Kimball Musk, Elon Musk's brother. And I was manic while I was out there. I had taken some drugs and I went back home and, I thought that I was about to change the world. I had all these grandiose thinking because I was manic. And I trusted this guy on the internet with my secret phrase to my cryptocurrency wallet. And he stole $450,000 from me. And the next day I show up to coach the women's rugby team and I'm out of my mind. And, I yell at them and I'm disorganized and disoriented. And what I didn't know was that their old coach was trying to form a coup to get rid of me and to get back into his position. And so I ended up losing that job as a result.
Man, I mean, I can't even manage what mental state I'd be in if I just lost that amount of money like that. That must have been incredibly tough. Let's go back to the playing bit though, Tyler. When you first put the boots back on again after your knee injury, like how did you feel physically? Did you feel physically ready to go, or were you nervous about your knee and how it would all hold up?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be a little bit of apprehension with my knee. Like once you see your knee go into your quad, it definitely changes you. But I felt like I could still do a lot of the same things on the field. I wasn't as much of a speed demon anymore, but like I had grown in terms of like orchestration and just basically managing the game as a fly half. Like I was a smarter player. And I think in some regard, I was a better player than before I had hurt my knee. But, I just couldn't do some of the things that I could previously do.
Yeah. Is that a permanent thing now? You still haven't regained any speed or stuff?
No, I mean, like by spring of 2024, I was in the best shape of my life. I was fast. I was strong. I could do everything. I could play center. And, I thought that last year, 2024, was going to be the year that I showed the world what I could do on the rugby field. And I ended up rupturing my patellar tendon in my second game. But what I did prove to myself was that, like, okay, you can get through this injury and you can be better than before. When I had first gotten back into the sport, it kind of happened overnight. And so I wasn't necessarily in the best shape. But once I was like, okay, this is what I want to do, like, I put my body there. And that gives me hope that this time around I can still do it again.
Yeah, and how's rehab going? You're taking it a bit more seriously this time, because I understand from the book that the first time you just kind of did nothing really.
Yeah, definitely. I hired a strength trainer to work with me, do a lot of things like split squats and deadlifts and, everything like that. I'm trying to run as much as I can. That's been a difficulty for me, because it's kind of like the right side of my body weighs an extra 50 pounds or something like that. But I'm making improvements. I get frustrated at like how long it's taking, but I know that I'm going to get there. I'm working too hard to not get there.
Yeah. And what about the coaching side of things? Do you think you'll get back into coaching as well?
Definitely. Yeah. No, I plan to, I'm going to see how much longer I can play for. If I have another traumatic injury, I'll probably be done. But I do want to kind of see through the twilight of my career. I'm only 32, and if Flyhalf can play for a long time, if he's not getting hurt all the time. So I'm hoping I get a 3 or 4 more years, and then after that, yeah, I would love to coach. Coaching brings me a lot of joy. It's really nice to like, relate to the next generation. And like I said, like rugby is my community, and I know that I need a community.
And in terms of the coaching itself, I think you said that sometimes women's rugby in the US can be really basic, but you didn't want to coach like that. Why didn't you want to coach like that? And what did you want the girls to be able to do?
Yeah. I just think that like, one pass and crash or, slow balls all the time, that's not rugby. That's not fun. No one really likes to enjoy playing that or watching that. And, at the end of the day, like there's 15 people on each team. You're only going to fool them if the ball is moving around really fast. You're not going to catch them off guard just running straight at their face. And so it was important to me to develop those skills and to develop that like team strategy. And I think that helped a lot because of a lot of teams we were playing a lot simpler of a game. They didn't have all these misdirection plays. They didn't have, penalty plays where like they had like the line of people where they're kind of passing the ball and then someone squirts through the middle of them. We were doing everything. We had clever line out plays, where the 9 would sneak out the backside, and things like that. So, that's what makes coaching. You're not a coach if your team's just going to do a one pass and crash or a slow ball every time. You want them to know that, like, look, there's no other sport with 15 people on each side. Like, let's use all of them. I think that's what's beautiful about the game.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, what I'm really interested in is where you got your inspiration from. Was this from watching games on the TV? Was it from talking to your parents, maybe, or where? Or did you just kind of make it up yourself?
Yeah, everything. You take a little from everywhere when you're a coach. I got my organization and the let's map everything out before practice from my high school football coach. He was a Connecticut State Hall of Fame football coach, and he taught me a lot about how to build a community and how to make your community be on the same page with one another. Watching Six Nations and watching international rugby gave me ideas for different play strategies, and YouTube gave me ideas for different practice games and stuff like that. And some of it just came from my own creativity, whether it was, from my own experiences playing or from just like thinking about it strategically and trying to figure out what the best way to, get through to these players might be. You got to try everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, I coached for a few years and I like you, did all the things that you've just mentioned. But I found actually the best success came from the things that I kind of invented myself, or an idea that just fitted that specific scenario exactly right. Was that your experience as well?
Yeah, yeah. We had some fun like kicking games that just came out of a dream or something like that. And those were the activities that were the most fun for the players.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, looking forward now, sort of big picture stuff. In terms of the global game, the Rugby World Cup is coming to your country in 2031. Is that something that's on your radar yet? Is it something that's within the sort of rugby radar in the US there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at least in my circles, we get together, we watch Six Nations and stuff like that, and everyone's following the Team USA. I don't know how well we're gonna do. I'd love for us to do something crazy and shock the world, but it's just amazing to have the sport come here, introduce it to new people. Hopefully, get more solid ground under our feet as a rugby nation. And yeah, it should be good. Like, I think sevens did one thing for the US, and I think our sevens game is great, but I don't know. Let's be honest. Is sevens real rugby? I'm not quite sure. I'd love for the US to be great at 15s.
Yeah, but the thing is, you're starting to get some good foundation blocks now. MLR has been there and steady now for quite a few years. Does that feel like it's growing at all, or does it feel quite stagnant?
It's hard to tell because I'm kind of in this bubble, right? I follow it more than other people do. It's great to have people like Marcus Smith say that, oh, I'm going to play in the MLR someday, either in Los Angeles or Miami. A star like that would do wonders for the game. But like you see things like the Toronto team and the New York Rugby Union team, teams that were part of the MLR but had to drop out because they weren't getting funded enough. So you see that and you're like, all right, well, is this a success? It's got to be a success because the league's been around longer than 4 or 5 years at this point, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think there's growing pains, but I think eventually it'll continue to grow, and I think it'll continue to inspire young players around the country. Because before, like when I was coming out of college and there was no MLR, it was like, okay, like what do we do next? And the answer would be these premier teams where they maybe had a venture capitalist who was also the team coach, and he would find a job and a green card, for you to play for his team for a while. So it was kind of like the Wild West. So it's nice to see the game mature a little bit, but I think there's some ways to go.
Yeah, definitely is some ways to go, but it's good that progress is being made. Now, back to you, Tyler. I know you've been really ambitious with your playing goals as a younger man. What are your sort of playing goals now? Do you still really want to try and achieve as much as you can in the game?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. At this point, I want to have fun. I want to be a starting fly half and have a winning season. And, I have dreams of winning a national title and, playing at a higher level than I've played before. But, at the end of the day, it's about the journey. And, my journey has been priceless. I've been through a lot, and to even get back on the field, for a lot of people that wouldn't even be realistic. And so I'm just trying to take it one day at a time, and hopefully, the progress that I build over time will result in, some of my goals being accomplished, because I do think I can play still at a high level.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. That's good to hear. Okay. That feels like a great place to bring this section of the show to a close, and we'll move on to the stash section. Tyler, so what is your favorite kit of all time? So this can be any team from any era.
I have some of my dad's old rugby jerseys from when he played. I mentioned my team, the Hartford Wanderers. Before the Hartford Wanderers existed, there's the West Hartford Yahoos and the Berlin Strollers. And I have a West Hartford Yahoos number 15 jersey. It's green. It's got this little kind of leprechaun with a jug of beer on it. It's got the collar, like it's a green long sleeve jersey with the collar on it. And I started the first, when I was still coaching that Eastern women's rugby team, I started a sevens team to play in the tournament in New York City that I had the girls going to. And I recruited some guys from Hartford, some guys from, Fairfield, and some guys from other clubs. And I entered the team as the West Hartford Yahoos. And we played in the Premier Division. Our first game of the day was against the Bermuda national team, and we got crushed. But it was the team's first game back in 25 years, so you can't really fault us too much for it. So I got to go with the West Hartford Yahoos as my favorite kit.
Yeah, 25 years. That's a long layoff. And what about awful kits? These are kits that you think are terrible and should be thrown in the bin.
The Hartford Wanderers, one year it was our team's 50th anniversary, and so they put a patch on everyone's sleeve that said 50 on it, but it kind of looked like it was like a football jersey everybody on the team was number 50. And so it was a little confusion to girlfriends and people that weren't didn't really know, they're like, oh, there goes number 50. And it's like, wait, everyone's number 50. So I mean, I love the Hartford Wanderers, but that jersey, we don't use it anymore, thankfully. But
fair enough. And what about favorite stash that you've ever received? So this can be something that you've earned, or maybe somebody gifted it to you.
Gosh, I don't know. I like all of my old college stuff, all the stuff that says Hooligans on it. I have a jersey that was kind of given to me after I left the school. And I love wearing that to practice. A lot of the great stuff that I was given a long time ago, I threw out when I quit rugby, which is a travesty. And, a lot of the stuff that I didn't throw out, when I lost my job as the women's rugby coach, I gifted a bunch of those things to the team. It's kind of like an apology. So a lot of my good rugby stuff isn't here any longer. My uncle, he actually played until he was 63. Yeah. And, he's in the Connecticut Gray Rugby Hall of Fame. And he gave me a framed picture that says, "My life, my game, rugby since 1823." And it's, got a bunch of guys running around the pitch. I love looking at that.
That's amazing. What a great piece of memorabilia that is. Okay, Tyler, we'll bring this to a close now. But as we do, is there any kind of closing thoughts or anything you would like to say?
No, I mean, I wrote a book, and right now it's a new release bestseller for rugby related books. And so if you're a rugby fan or just, a fan of resilience, I think you should check out my book, The Maniac with No Knees, and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've read it myself, and it's a hell of a ride you've been on, Tyler. So thank you very much for sharing. And if people want to get hold of you directly, how was the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram. I post a lot of short essays and stuff about my writing journey on there. It's at Tyler_Kania, Kania. Yeah, come follow me.
Yeah, absolutely. I recommend you do. Tyler, thank you so much for being on the show today. And it's good to see you doing well.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
Really welcome. Okay, there he goes. I'm not kidding. It is a hell of a story. I finished it this morning as I was preparing to do this interview, and it was literally page turn. As I mentioned there, Tyler, great to see you doing well at the moment, and it's good to see you still with us. So fantastic there. With the podcast, we're doing loads of stuff on YouTube at the moment, so get over there and subscribe. It's Six Nations time, and that means there's just so much to talk about. The comments sections are raging, so get in there and share your opinion. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, then you can do all the social media stuff. You can like, share, comment, all of that jazz. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. But until then, get out and play.